Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Girardian Virtual Bible Study. My name is Adam Erickson, and I am here, as always, with Lindsay Paris Lopez. Hi, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm great, Adam. How are you?
Fantastic. I am doing really well, in part because I just love both of these stories that we're going to be talking about today. Isaiah chapter 62 verses 1 through 5, and maybe my favorite passage in all of Scripture, Jesus at the wedding of Cana.
Yeah, I read that passage at my best friend's wedding.
Oh,
so, I mean, my ultimate best friend is the one.
Me, of course. Your ultimate best friend is me. That's
no,
right? No. Oh,
no. I'm sorry, but you
I
are
am not competitive. I am not mimetic at all. As you
are up there. No, my
yes.
my ultimate best. You are way up there. But my ultimate best friend, of course, is my husband, and so I didn't read it at my own wedding.
That's
I read it at another friend's wedding. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we can go with that. Yes. Well, I love both of these passages. They're a lot of fun.
Too. Yeah. So I love these passages too, and I'm also doing well because I am happy that one of my really top good friends had a birthday yesterday.
Oh, who was that?
That was you. Yeah, that was you. Yeah. So
awesome. Yes,
yes. Adam had a birthday yesterday.
Thank you very much. Yesterday I turned 40, and you know what was weird? As I was reflecting on the decades, 29 to 30, I was really depressed. I thought I was losing something. I thought I was like losing my youth, my childhood or something. So like that period where I was turning 30, I was like, oh man, this is just, I don't like getting older. But now that I'm 40, I'm like, this is pretty awesome. I feel like I'm gaining a whole lot by turning 40. And I'm not sure exactly what I am gaining, but it feels so much better than turning 30. I don't know why.
That's wonderful. It gives me something to look forward to.
Did you have that experience when you turned 30? Or
when I turned 30, I felt like there was a lot more that I wanted to do in my life that I hadn't done. But now I've done some of it, and I realize that there's a lot of life ahead of me to do more. So I don't feel the same sense of, oh, where is my life going? And I'm almost 40. So I think my 40th birthday will be a happy one. And of course, you shared your 40th birthday with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we're going to talk about tomorrow. So we'll remind everyone at the end of this, but I wanted to let everyone know that here tomorrow, same time, same place, we'll be talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So.
A very important figure in the world landscape, Martin Luther King Jr. And he's around. It would have been his 90th birthday this year, I think I saw.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about his life and legacy tomorrow live. So join us then. But today we're here to talk about weddings and wine and why that all matters in the biblical text. So, Lindsay, we're going to start off with Isaiah chapter 62, verses 1 through 5. And you're going to read it, but maybe I'll just give a little bit of historical context here.
Please do.
Okay, awesome. So Isaiah is divided into like three different Isaiahs, writing at three different historical periods, right? So this is second Isaiah. First Isaiah is earlier, obviously, and talking during the Assyrian Empire is coming in, and Isaiah is trying to give a word of hope to the people. Second Isaiah is during the Babylonian Empire, also trying to give a word of hope, and why is this all happening? And third Isaiah happens after the Babylonian Empire, when King Cyrus the Great lets all of the people who have been conquered and thrown into the Babylonian exile go back to their homelands and worship the way that they want to worship. and build their temples that have been destroyed. And this is supposed to be a time of really great anticipation and hope. And you get some of that in 3rd Isaiah. But you also, when this time comes to happen, things don't always go the way that they hoped it would. Like there was a lot of mimetic rivalry, you would say, as to how to build the temple and who was going to build the temple. And there was also great conflict on one of the emphases in the book of Ezra during this time is how to keep the people holy. And one of the ways that you do that is to get rid of the non-Jews. That's what Ezra's plan was. And so a lot of the Jews who stayed behind during the exile married foreign wives. And so Ezra comes in and is like, okay, you got to go because we have to be pure. And this is actually a time of great pain. And Isaiah is looking forward to this time as a time of great hope and joy. But Isaiah sees what's happening, and this emphasis on holiness ends up tearing families apart, and it's horrible. And Isaiah sees how horrible this is. And so 3rd Isaiah is this really a lot of mixture of hope and then also despair. And this is actually one of the passages of hope. And so I'm not exactly sure when this was written, but it might have been like early in 3rd Isaiah when they're moving into the new land. So that's my setup for this passage. And
I mean, just based on what you said, this passage sounds like a transition into the 3rd Isaiah period. Because it's about vindication and salvation, so moving from the exile back into the land. So with that, I will begin chapter 62, verses 1 through 5. For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I will not rest until her vindication shines out like the dawn and her salvation like a burning torch. The nations shall see your vindication, and all the kings your glory, and you shall be called by a new name, the name of the Lord that the mouth of the Lord will give. You shall be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate, but you shall be called, my delight is in her. For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your builder marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you.
Yeah, so one of the great things about the Bible is the wedding metaphor. So you get this very early on, like in Genesis, you get the wedding metaphor. A lot of people say that actually what happens on the 10 Commandments is like a wedding. And this is where like the Jews get married to God, do this like it's a personal relationship and it's a covenant. I mean, that's very wedding-like language to make a covenant with someone. So this relationship that gets seen throughout the Bible, and some of the prophets say really, like Hosea comes to mind, where God does some pretty horrible things to the wife, Israel, for not staying faithful to God. And here, some of the prophets give a very different view that even maybe when that what matters is God's faithfulness to Israel. That's what ultimately matters. And here you get this, that God's delight is in her, is in Israel. So no matter what's happened, God remains faithful, right? And one of the really fascinating things about this passage is you shall no more be termed forsaken. And this is one of the big debates that's going on in the Hebrew Bible, is this debate about whether God forsakes the people, right? So Hosea, again, you get it. God forsakes the people for not being faithful. But here, Isaiah says, you will no more be termed forsaken.
Right. Right. It's very clearly not God saying, I will no more forsake you. And
That's it.
and if I mean, I guess this brings up a whole other debate, not new by any means, but if God doesn't change, if God remains faithful, and God's essential nature is love, in which there is no darkness, then the idea that God has forsaken Israel either must be mistaken, or there's something we're just not getting. And of course, you and I don't believe that any of the violence that befell Israel was enacted by God in the first place. But there are, of course, consequences to our actions. And this is God, I think, saying that I have been with you all along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I won't rest until everyone knows it, but I've been with you all along. So
Yep. That's the faithfulness of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as you were saying, the phrase "you shall no more be termed forsaken" is who is doing the forsaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what Isaiah is starting to take away from God, right? It's not God who is forsaking the people. So who's doing the forsaking? Well, empire is coming up against empire, and Israel is more or less just kind of in the way and getting demolished by all of these empires. It's humans that are forsaking one another, and God is showing God's faithfulness throughout it in this passage. So, I mean, there's some really beautiful stuff in here, like you shall be the crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord, and the royal diadem in the hand of your God. I mean, that's pretty beautiful language. And also Isaiah is flipping Israel's history upside down. In verse 2, the nations shall see your vindication, and all of the kings your glory. Well, all of Israel's history has been pretty much the opposite of that.
Right.
All of Israel's history has been basically being the victims of human violence. And now the nations will see your vindication, and all of the kings your glory. In the past, they haven't seen Israel's glory. They've seen Israel's demise. They've been part of Israel's demise.
Right. I think it really hit home with me when I read Dr. Anthony Bartlett's 7 Stories, and about how the Hebrew people who made up what would become Israel were basically the victims of war, the displaced, and the those who were stateless because of conquests, and came from, it wasn't just a geographical location that came. They were actually brought together from different areas when they were in Egypt. So it wasn't, it wasn't just a bloodline or a race. I mean, that's a human construct, but with real consequences in the real world. But that's not what this was. This was people who were forsaken from their own lands come together, and then they were still subject to violence and conquest. And this is God saying, I'm with you. I'm with the people who are suffering from conquest. And I mean, you shall no more be termed forsaken. That's, as you were saying, the people are doing the forsaking, and we project that onto God so that we can continue the cycle. We say, if you're forsaken, God has forsaken you, therefore I can forsake you, even though I was the one forsaking you in the first place. Now that you're really low and downtrodden, I can forsake you some more, and I can say this is the will of God. Because if it wasn't the will of God, you'd be fine. But that's not, the scripture is changing our mindset. It's really changing our mindset about whose side God is on, and really showing us that God is with the victims. not against us, but
Yep.
for justice.
Now, as good Girardians, we need to go to the cross,
Yeah.
right? And Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
Mhm.
Which has always been very kind of troubling to me. But the way that I think it needs to be interpreted is, for Christians, Jesus is the Word of God, correct?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is divine. And where does God go? To the place of where we usually think is God forsaken, even up on a cross, right? To show that God goes to the God forsaken places, to the place where we think are God forsaken places because of God's faithfulness to us. God even goes to the valley of the shadow of death, and we will fear no evil, because even that place that we thought was God forsaken, God goes with us, even with us to the cross.
Psalm 22 there, and that little bit that he could utter as he was dying and as his body was collapsing, he can't say much under those circumstances, would have immediately triggered a couple of feelings that would make people think. It would make people think of the apparent forsakenness of Jesus, but it would also remind them at the end that that the psalm goes on to say, all the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before him. And there is no place on earth that is forsaken. So the cross is like the ultimate place where we think one is forsaken, and yet he wasn't. Just like Israel,
Yep.
We thought it forsaken, but God's going to teach us not to call it that anymore. So.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's move on to John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. I love this passage. We've got some viewers, and if you have any comments or questions that you want to bring up, go ahead and type that into the comment box, and we'll bring them in. This is John, the Gospel of John. Calls all of the miracles that other gospels call miracles, John calls them signs. And these are signs that point beyond themselves. So the point of the miracle or of the sign is not the sign in and of itself, but it is what it reveals about the kingdom of God, right? So there are times when in other gospels, especially where Jesus performs miracles, like the feeding of the 5,000, and people come back and they're like, hey, could you do that trick again? That was really cool. And Jesus is like, you've totally missed the point. The point is not the miracle. The point is what it shows about human nature and what it shows about the nature of the kingdom of God. So this is the first sign, the first miracle that Jesus performs. And I'll go ahead and read it. Okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Here we go. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stones, water jars, for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Yeah.
Eric Buys, hi Eric, says this: a very interesting observation in the book of Anthony Bartlett is the difference between the Egyptian version of the plagues and the Hebrew version. According to the Egyptian version, Egyptian society had to get rid of the Hebrews to save themselves from the wrath of the gods. Yes, that's a great observation, Eric, and I love that book by Tony. Highly recommend it. We did that video series a few months ago when the book came out, so highly recommend that book. So, Lindsay, what do you make of the wedding at Cana story?
Oh, well, I mean, I do love this miracle.
Jesus came to party. I just want to say it. Jesus, like there are all of these passages in the Bible. One of the things Jesus gets accused of is being a glutton and a drunkard, right? And as if that's a bad thing. I mean, moderation is always good, of course, right? But Jesus came to enjoy life, and so much of religion, and Christian religion in particular, avoids this kind of joy that Jesus brings to this wedding party, his first miracle. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about this passage. Like, oftentimes when people think of religion, they think of like this kind of wet blanket that says, "Oh, don't have fun." But here's Jesus keeping the party going all night.
Absolutely, he cared about people's joy, and yes, I love that. I think that's probably my favorite thing about this, is that he cared about people's joy, although his first answer to his mother is he sounds a little bit reluctant at first, and I want to explore why. I honestly, I have some ideas, but I've never really had a definitive thought as to why he would say, "Woman, what concern is that of mine?" And I mean, obviously my time has not yet come. There's foreshadowing. I get some of that, but I do not understand the initial reluctance. So
well, he says first, a lot of people get tripped up by Jesus calling his mother woman, right? So this feels kind of derogatory to us, but all the scholars that I read said something like, don't impute our modern views onto the ancient text. When Jesus calls her woman when he's at the cross, he does it in a very benevolent way, a very caring, loving way, when he says, "Woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother." And this is very caring and loving. So he could be saying it in the same way here, although he does seem to be arguing a bit with her about what it is not his time yet. So what is Jesus's time that's not quite yet? And yet he ends up performing the miracle anyway. So was it his time and he didn't know it, but Mary knew it was his time? So she pushed the envelope by saying to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to do."
Well, I mean, of course, when we hear that my time has not yet come, we would think of the cross, of course. And there is blood and water at the cross, and there's wine before the cross, and there's water turned to wine here. So all those associations come up. And I think it's really important to consider that the jars he used were jars for ritual purification, and I think that the juxtaposition of filling the jars for purification with wine for the purpose of the further enjoyment of the party, I think that has a lot to do with. I think that's a very important part of this passage. It still doesn't, but, I still don't quite understand why he's arguing with his mother, and his mother's attitude is completely different. It's not to argue back. So again, we see what could turn into a rivalry not turning into a rivalry, and we give credit to Mary for that. We give all the credit to Jesus for just about everything, but some of the lessons we learn are from the other people. And here's a lesson from Mary. She didn't get involved with an argument. She didn't say, "You're my son, do what I tell you." Instead,
Right.
she said, "Do whatever he tells you." So there is definitely something to learn from that. And what the lesson is not to just sit and take it when someone insults you. First of all, maybe he didn't insult her, and that is our modern perception. But it sounded like argument, and she did not respond in kind. And I think that's important. She kept her focus on the need of the moment. So it's not that she was just shrinking back. It's that her focus was, they need wine. Jesus can give them wine. And instead of arguing back, she says to them, "Do whatever he tells you." And then he's probably thinking, "Oh, great, now I have to tell them something. I guess I better do this." So she wins if it was an argument. So there's a lot to learn in that.
Yeah, do whatever he tells you to do is Gerard Sloyan in his interpretation series says that is the definition that Mary gives. It's the definition of discipleship. Do whatever Jesus tells you to do. And here I want to, Sloyan also references the Greek god of wine, Dionysus, and says, what kind of new Jewish Dionysian god is this? And as Girardians, I think it's really important to pay attention to this myth of Dionysus. First, because Girard wrote in his book, I think I See Satan Fall Like Lightning, he compared Nietzsche has this passage, Dionysus versus the crucified. And so anytime I think that we see a comparison between gospel stories and myths of the ancient world, don't be afraid to explore them. Sloyan doesn't explore this very much, but I think it's worth doing because the god Dionysus is the god of wine, but is also the god of frenzy. And Dionysus had a rivalry with his cousin, a man named Pentheus. And Dionysus was half god, half man, as opposed to Jesus, who's fully God and fully man, right? So there you see the comparisons. And also Dionysus wanted to be acknowledged as a god. And so he went off from his home country to Asia and told them about himself and had himself worshipped. And by the time he got back home, his cousin Pentheus, who was king, said that Dionysus was not a god. And so they started this rivalry, and Pentheus put Dionysus in prison. And then Pentheus was shaming Dionysus, and Dionysus gets out of prison and ends up sending Pentheus to this hill where there were all of these worshippers of Dionysus, and Dionysus got them into this drunken frenzy and had them kill his cousin Pentheus. So that's how Dionysus uses wine.
Yeah.
Right? In order to shame someone. And this is the radical difference that Jesus brings to the world, is stop shaming people. And if people are coming into a place of shame, like they're running out of wine at a party, this would be a super shameful thing, Sloyan says, in the ancient world. The whole point of a wedding party is to keep the party going all night. And if it stops because the wine stops, then you're in trouble and you are being shamed. And so Jesus comes into this moment and does the opposite of what Dionysus does, which is to keep people from being shamed and to keep the party going.
I think that is so powerful. That is, I mean, the comparison to Dionysus is, that's brilliant. I think that the use of the jars that were for purification is really important to that, because when we think of purifying ourselves. I mean, you said it earlier when we were talking about Isaiah, about how Ezra thought purification was expelling everyone else.
Yep.
And so this is ritual washing. It's not an expulsion, but it's, and we still do it as Christians. We still, of course, have baptism, and, washing is good. But if we use it in a way to say we are better than them, and this is our ritual, this is what we do, this is, as the baptismal liturgy goes, God claims us and puts a sign on us. That's true, but we don't want to emphasize the us to the exclusion of anyone else. Right. And so jars that were used for purification is a good thing, but it's often confused with exclusion, which is a bad thing. And what really purifies us is not exclusion, but our love for each other. And turning the water to wine in a festivity of love and, for a wedding, for a joining, for a, we're coming together as one, that the symbolism of that is really powerful. So this is transforming our idea of purity. And you know what? It's not, it's not this strict, you must obey, you must abide by these stringent rules. It's joyful, and purity is associated with joy. And that's a wonderful thing that Jesus does for us. And the wine makes us happy, but not murderous. So that's
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Jesus could have said, "Oh, come on, Mom. Like, they didn't plan for this. It's their own fault. They deserve what they get." But he doesn't do that. No. He says, "My hour hasn't come yet." And then all of a sudden, well, maybe his hour has come, and Mary was right. And so it's time to keep the party going. Yeah. So anyway, those are our thoughts. We're about 5 minutes over what we plan to do, but man, I just dig these passages. They're awesome.
This is fun.
So thank you everybody for joining us. And if you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them in the comment section. And we would love to read them. One of the things that I love about these passages that there is so much more to mine in them, and we would love to keep mining them with you. So please do that, and join us next week as we talk about the third Sunday after Epiphany. We'll get into some Nehemiah, and we'll go back into Luke. So until then, hope you have a great week.
And don't forget to join us tomorrow if you're available. Same time, same place. We'll be talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. between his birthday and Martin Luther King Day, which will be Monday. So,
fantastic. Yeah. Awesome. Until then, peace be with you, friends.
Peace be with you.